There is a truth that most people realize only when it's too late. Life doesn't punish you for not doing enough right things, but because you unintentionally did too many wrong ones. I have met many hardworking, ambitious, determined people, but they were stuck for 10, 20 years, just because of a few seemingly harmless choices. They are not poor because they lack opportunities. They are poor because small mistakes, repeated consistently, quietly pull them away from the life they want. And what haunts me the most is, most of those mistakes are not new. They have happened to millions of people before you, and they are still happening every day. I remember once a man stood up and asked me, "Jim, why do I try so hard but my life doesn't change at all?" I looked into his tired eyes and realized he didn't lack effort. He lacked the principles to avoid the mistakes that have been proven to derail a life. You see, success is a long journey, but failure only takes a few wrong decisions. An investment you don't understand, a bout of impatience wanting to change your life in a few months, a time you followed the crowd, a little arrogance thinking, "I won't be like them." Just one of those, and you can lose an entire decade. And here's the part that truly shook me when I was young. The richest people I've ever met aren't better than you in what they do right. They're better than you in knowing what must absolutely never be done. That's where the subtlety lies. Today, I want to share with you 7 silent principles that keep life on track, principles most people aren't taught in school, aren't shown at work, and aren't patient enough to figure out on their own in life. These 7 principles may not make you rich immediately, but they can save you from mistakes that could steal 10, 20 years of your life. And it all starts with a simple yet powerful truth. Principle 1, learn from other people's mistakes before they become yours. I used to believe that experience is the greatest teacher. But the older I get, the more I realize experience isn't just the greatest teacher, it's the most expensive one. There are lessons you cannot afford to learn firsthand. You don't have enough time. And life is not kind enough. I remember a phase when I kept failing, not because I lacked effort, but because I lived as if I were the first person in the world to ever make mistakes. I kept believing I had to collide myself, fall myself, learn by myself. But those experiences didn't take me far. They only made me exhausted and drained. Then one evening, I sat in a tiny rented room, so poor that the wind blowing through the door gap sounded louder than my footsteps. I reviewed every decision I had made, an investment I didn't understand, a time I listened to someone without verifying, a time I was blindly confident that I'll get away with it. All of them were mistakes that millions before me had made. All of them had been written in history, in books, in reports, in memoirs, but I had never read them. I had never learned them. I let others write their mistakes in blood and tears, but I chose not to look. And that's when I understood. I don't need to burn my own hand to know fire is hot. I just need to look at someone who got burned. From that day, I began a new journey. The journey of studying other people's failures. I read about financial bubbles from 300 years ago. I read about legends who went bankrupt. I read about smart people who got swept up in greed and how they collapsed just because they thought, this time is different. And the more I read, the more I saw a terrifying truth. People don't fail because of something new. They fail because of foolish patterns that have repeated for centuries. South Sea or stocks, tulip mania or NFTs, .com or meme stocks, different names. But the essence, greed, ignorance, fear of missing out is eerily the same. You know, people don't lose money because the market is bad. They lose money because they never take the time to understand why others lost money. They watch a 10-minute video about top 5 stocks about to skyrocket, but don't spend 10 minutes reading about companies that collapsed from fraud. They follow a piece of advice online, but don't bother learning why people before them failed doing the same thing. And here's what the truly rich understand well. You don't need to be smarter than others to be richer than them. You just need to make fewer mistakes than they do. But to make fewer mistakes, you must learn from those who made them. I started doing something small, but important. Each month I read one failure story, not for entertainment, but for preparation. Reading about a company that once shined but collapsed because of its leader's greed. Reading about a brilliant investor who lost everything because he used leverage. Reading about people who were very close to success but failed because they didn't recognize the warning signs. A failure story you read today can save you from losing 10 years tomorrow. I want you to imagine a field. An ignorant farmer sows the wrong seeds, waters the wrong way, loses the entire harvest. He suffers for a whole year. But you just need to stand and say, I won't do that. He loses a season to learn that lesson. You lose 10 seconds. That is the power of principle 1, shortening a decade of pain into a moment of clarity. And I want you to ask yourself this, the question that changed my entire path. Whose mistakes are you learning from? Your own or hundreds of years of history? Because if you only learn from yourself, you are turning your life into a laboratory. And the cost of life experiments is often very high. When I realized this, I began to see another mistake more subtle, more common, and just as dangerous. A mistake I believe everyone has made at least once in their lives. Principle 2, don't buy what you don't understand. When I was young, I had a very dangerous habit I didn't even notice. I frequently made decisions about things I didn't really understand. I remember once, a friend invited me to invest in a project he claimed was a life-changing opportunity. I asked, how does it work? He said, it's complicated, just trust me. And I trusted him. I didn't understand it, didn't know how it created value, didn't know where the risks were, but I still put my trust and my money in it. A foolish decision which I only understood once the money disappeared. From that experience, I learned a lesson I want to share with you today. One of the fastest ways to ruin your life is to invest in something you don't understand, even when everyone around you is excitedly jumping in. I've seen this happen many times. People can spend hours comparing rice cookers, but only a few minutes deciding on an investment they can't even explain in a simple sentence. They don't know how that product makes money, don't understand what makes it rise in value, don't know who's behind it, but they get swept up by the crowd, by the cheers of others making profits. And you know what's most dangerous? The things you don't understand always look the most attractive. It's like a fog hiding the dark corners, showing you only the promise, not the reality. I once asked a very wealthy friend, how do you avoid bad investments? He looked at me and said, easy, Jim. I don't buy anything that makes me frown when I try to explain it. I laughed at the time, but the older I get, the more I see the wisdom young people often miss. Today, people buy what they don't understand faster than ever. They buy because they say it's a sure win. My friends are in. It feels like a rare chance. Price is rising. I don't want to be late. And they jump in, but when things turn around, they panic because they don't know what they're holding. I always tell my students, you can only stay calm when the market shakes if you understand what you're holding. If you don't understand, you'll panic like a child lost in a marketplace. Understanding is the root of confidence. Not understanding is the root of panic. Let me tell you a small story. There was a man who bought a large farm just because people said land prices would rise. He didn't know what could grow there, what the climate was like, what the water sources were. He bought because he heard it was a trend. When drought came, the crops withered, and he finally realized he knew nothing about the land he had put all his wealth into. He lost almost everything because of a decision built on blindness. Many call that misfortune. I call it a rule. You cannot expect a good outcome from something you don't understand. I want you to remember this metaphor. Don't sow seeds on soil you've never touched. Your seeds are your time, money, energy. The soil is the commitments, the opportunities you choose to trust. If you don't know whether that soil is toxic, rocky, or has sunlight, you will lose the entire harvest. Not because you're bad, but because you sow blindly. And I want you to ask yourself a very important question. Can you explain the biggest investment of your life in one simple sentence? If not, you're not investing. You're gambling. And life does not favor those who gamble without understanding the rules. Remember, you don't need to know many things. You only need to deeply understand the things you hold. You may miss a few big opportunities. That's fine. But you will avoid disasters. And in the long game, the winner is not the one who wins fast, but the one who doesn't lose early. When you are clear enough to avoid what you don't understand, you will step into an even more valuable lesson, a lesson most people stumble on when trying to change their lives in a few months. Principle 3, impatience is the quiet enemy of wealth. There's something strange about humans. When talking about life, everyone understands that things need time. Trees need time to grow. Children need time to mature. Harvests need time to come. But when it comes to money, all those principles vanish. I have met many smart, even talented people who lost entire decades because of one dangerous habit. They want to get rich fast. Not rich, but rich fast. Not progress, but progress immediately. I remember the first time I heard my mentor Shoaf say this. I was young and restless. Jim, if you want to get rich fast, you will have to pay with foolishness. And life never discounts the price of foolishness. I didn't like hearing that at the time, but the older I get, the more I realize it's one of the bitter truths of adulthood. I've seen people rush into the market just because they saw someone make 200% in a few weeks. They become obsessed with stories of ordinary people becoming millionaires overnight. They believe that if they're not fast, they'll miss the chance of a lifetime. But they don't understand one thing. The things that give money fast often take money back fast and take what you never expected to lose. Peace, confidence, time. Impatience makes you decide before you understand. Impatience makes you do things you'll regret. And impatience makes you lose the most important thing in investing. Clarity. I once met a very hardworking man. He said, Jim, I can't stand feeling slow. I have to do something. I have to jump in. I have to multiply my assets quickly. He believed that doing nothing meant losing opportunities. I looked at him and said, not every movement is progress. A ship spinning in circles is still moving but going nowhere. A few years later, he told me he had lost almost everything because of hasty decisions that looked shiny in the first few hours but became nightmares a few weeks later. Life has a paradox. The impatient repeat the same mistakes. The patient often get it right once and far enough. I want you to visualize this. Two people plant bamboo. The first one digs it up every week to see if it has grown. The second one plants it, waters it, and waits patiently. A whole year, nothing. Second year, still quiet. But in the fifth year, the bamboo grows so fast you can see it rise daily. The difference isn't in the seed, but in who understands the law of time. Impatience makes you dig up the seed halfway. Impatience makes you quit before compounding blooms. Impatience makes you feel I'm not good enough, when the truth is you just haven't been consistent long enough. I once said, we overestimate what we can do in 1 year, but underestimate what we can do in 10. Impatience makes you live in 1-year cycles. Patience makes you live in 10-year transformations. And sometimes that's the difference between a life full of regret and a life full of achievement. Let me tell you another story. A young man came to me and said, Jim, I want to be rich before 30. I smiled and asked, why 30? He said, because he saw others do it. I looked at him, put my hand on his shoulder and said, if you race against someone else's timeline, you will lose your own life. Not everyone starts from the same place. Not everyone has the same foundation. Not everyone gets the same luck. But everyone has one equal thing, time. The patient use it to build. The impatient use it to burn. Look at truly wealthy people, not the flashy ones, but the sustainable ones. You'll see they share one thing. They are not in a hurry. They are not impulsive. They don't chase sure win opportunities. They don't let the fear of being late control them. They know wealth is not a lottery. Wealth is a process, and a process cannot be forced to ripen. I want you to write this sentence down and keep it for a long time. Impatience is the fastest path to decisions we wish we could go back in time and fix, but can't. A reflection question for you today. How much time have you lost because of a decision made in impatience? And if you could go back to that moment, what would you say to yourself? And when you begin to see the destructive power of impatience, you'll understand something else, a very common misunderstanding that most people are misled by, thinking it is wisdom. But in reality, it only keeps them stuck. Principle 4, don't stretch your life too thin. I used to think that to be safe, I had to do many things. Many projects, many income streams, many options, many directions. It sounds smart until I realized a dangerous truth. When you spread yourself too thin, you no longer have depth in anything. I realized this in a conversation with an older entrepreneur. He said to me, Jim, young people today have a big problem. They think that more is always better. but more is only good if you're strong enough to carry it. Back then, I didn't understand. But the more I lived, the more I saw that sentence contained a whole lifetime of experience. People don't collapse because they lack opportunities. They collapse because they try to carry too many opportunities at the same time. I've met many people who tried to own 15, 20, 30 different investments. They buy everything they hear about. A little real estate, a little stock, a little crypto, a few projects introduced by friends, a bit of leave it there, maybe it'll go up. It looks diversified. But when I ask them one simple question, what do you really understand among these? They go silent. You cannot understand 30 things at once. You cannot keep track of everything. You cannot care for every little piece of land as if it were truly yours. And that's why so many people diversify but never get anywhere. I want you to picture this. A farmer has 30 plots of land scattered everywhere. Every day he runs from one place to another, watering a bit, fertilizing a bit, checking a bit. But no piece of land gets enough care to truly bloom. Meanwhile, another farmer has only 3 plots, but he pours his whole heart into them. At the end of the season, you know who harvests more. The first one has diversification, but the second one has focus. I once said, spreading wide is not always safe. Sometimes spreading wide is just how you hide the fact that you don't know what you're doing. My competitors out there often say, diversify to reduce risk. That's true if you know what you're doing. But blind diversification only increases risk because you're putting money into things you cannot control. You don't need 50 options. You need 5 things you truly understand well. I once met a young woman who was working 4 jobs at once, taking 2 courses, and joining 3 business projects. She thought, the more paths I take, the more chance I have to succeed. But in reality, she only became exhausted, and none of those paths had enough time to ripen into results. People don't burn out because they do many things. People burn out because they scatter their soul across too many things that don't matter. I want you to look at yourself. How many things are you trying to hold at the same time? How many promises? How many goals? How many projects you already know you cannot fully commit to? Wealth is like a garden. It doesn't need many seeds. It needs seeds that are cared for properly. And there's something else I want you to remember deeply. Excessive diversification doesn't just dilute your money, it dilutes your attention. And attention is far more precious than money. You can earn money back, but you cannot get back the focus that has been worn down. I want to share with you a metaphor I always use with my students. A deep river can create a powerful current, but a shallow puddle only creates mud. Don't live like a puddle, live like a river. There is one question I ask myself every year, and today I want you to ask yourself. The things I'm doing, how many of them are truly important enough to deserve my full focus? If that number is over 10, you're diluting your life. If it's over 20, you're living a scattered life. And if it's over 30, you're no longer living. You're just trying to survive among too many unimportant things. Remember, success doesn't come from doing a lot. Success comes from doing the right things and doing them deeply. And when you understand this, you'll see another deeper truth. Sometimes the stability you think you have is just the accumulation of wrong choices. Stacked over the years, Principle 5, don't let hidden costs eat away at your life. There is a kind of loss that most people don't see. Not the big blows, not the obvious mistakes, but the small leaks, silent, quiet, yet powerful enough to take away 10, 20 years of your life without you knowing. I once met a man who had worked hard for many years, but his finances still hadn't improved. He said, Jim, I don't spend lavishly. I don't invest recklessly. So why am I still not moving forward? I told him to bring every record, document, bill, and statement he had. And in less than an hour, I saw that what made him poor were not big mistakes, but the small fees he never paid attention to. I pointed out each one to him. An investment management fee, a transaction fee, an account maintenance fee, a conversion fee, a withdrawal fee, a portion of taxes he accidentally paid more than he needed to. And when he added them up, he slumped into his chair. The total amount he had lost over 8 years just from not paying attention was enough for him to take a year off work and live comfortably. You know what haunts me? That was only 8 years. Imagine 30 years. Imagine a whole lifetime. It's not big wrong decisions that make you poor. It's the small cuts repeated every day. People are often afraid of a fatal stab, but they are not afraid of small scratches, even though those scratches can bleed you to death. I've watched many people invest. They trade constantly, buying and selling nonstop, chasing every little move. They think they are being proactive, dynamic, smarter than the crowd, but they don't realize every time they press BUI or sell, they pay a price, and that price slowly eats their financial future. They don't see the fees. They don't see the taxes. They only see the emotion, and emotion blinds them. I once asked a young man who was very excited about his new investment, "How much do you think you made?" He said, "About 20% in a few months." I asked, "After taxes?" He blinked. I asked again, "After trading fees? After maintenance fees? After management fees?" In the end, that 20% profit was less than 7%. I looked at him and said, "You're not becoming rich because of how much you earn. You're not becoming rich because of how little you keep. People are not poor because they don't make money. They are poor because they don't keep money." I want you to imagine a bucket of water with a few small holes at the bottom. You can pour water in nonstop as strong as you want, but the water will still leak out. Not because you don't pour enough, but because you don't plug the holes. Finances work the same way. You don't need to earn more. You just need to keep more. And the keeping starts with recognizing where you're leaking. Bank fees, transaction fees, management fees, taxes from selling too early, money lost to slippage from emotional decisions, money lost from constantly changing direction. Unstable strategies, small amounts, repeated 1,000 times. I once told one of my students, if you want to be truly rich, you have to learn to respect every dollar you keep, not just every dollar you earn. A small fee today is a big slowdown tomorrow. The way you manage each dollar reflects the way you manage your whole life. I want you to look back at the past year. How many fees have you never read carefully? How much extra tax did you pay because of lack of understanding? How many transactions cost you money just because you wanted the feeling of doing something? I want you to remember this metaphor. A ship doesn't sink because of big waves. It sinks because of small holes no one ever looks at. Your life is the same. If you know how to plug each small hole, you won't have to swim so fast just to stay afloat. Finally, I want you to ask yourself a very straightforward question, one I ask myself every year. The things I'm paying for every month, which ones are truly making my life better? And which ones are only making me slowly poorer? Just one timely decision can preserve decades of freedom for you. Don't let costs, no matter how small, take that away from you. And when you learn how to keep what belongs to you, you'll understand an even more dangerous mistake, a mistake that makes even the smartest people lose their prosperity simply because they cannot control themselves. Principle 6, don't let emotions drive your life. There is something I learned very late in life. You don't lose because of the market. You lose because of yourself. Not because there are too few opportunities. Not because you lack intelligence. Not because the world is unfair. But because you let emotions decide what reason should hold. I know this because I used to be that way. I used to let fear, greed, pride, and anxiety control every choice in my life, and none of those ever took me where I wanted to go. I remember the first time the market crashed when I was young. I had very little money, just enough to maintain a life that was barely okay. And when the market plunged, I panicked. I stayed up all night, constantly calculating, constantly imagining the worst scenarios. And then in a moment of fear, I sold everything sold right at the bottom. A few months later, the market recovered. I lost more because of my own fear, not because of the market. That was the first time I understood emotions make you see danger where there is none, and opportunity where there shouldn't be any. But emotions don't just destroy money. They destroy your plans, your dreams, your stability, your ability to see life clearly. I once met a young man full of potential, but always in a rush. Whenever he saw others succeed, he panicked. The feeling of being left behind made him jump into everything too fast, too hard, too emotionally. The result? Every year, a new strategy. Every month, a new plan. Every week, a new idea. And no idea stayed long enough to bear fruit. Greed makes you believe things will be better than they really are. Fear makes you believe things will be worse than they really are. Both make you lose the truth. I want you to picture a ship at sea. Emotions are the wave. When the waves are small, you can glide over them. But when the waves are big, if you don't know how to hold the wheel, the ship will be dragged to places you never wanted to go. You cannot control the waves, but you can control the wheel if you're willing to hold it with reason. I once met a woman who had saved her whole life, and then one day, out of fear from bad news, she sold everything and pulled it all into cash. The market recovered, went higher, but she didn't dare go back in. She said, "Jim, I'm afraid of feeling that way again." I looked at her and understood it wasn't her money that was stuck, it was her heart. Fear, once buried deep in the soul, can chain a life more tightly than any physical shackle. But emotions have another form more subtle, blind hope. It makes you hold on to something you should have let go of long ago. A toxic relationship, a job with no future, an investment that was wrong from the start. You keep it, not because it's good, but because you hope it will get better. Hope without reason to guide it is just fear in disguise. And then I realized, no important decision should be made when you're at an emotional extreme. Not when you're too happy, not when you're too sad, not when you're too angry, not when you're too scared, not when you're too confident. Emotion is the fire. Reason is the pot. Cooking with fire is good. But if you don't have a pot, you're just burning everything. I want you to remember this metaphor. A driver in fog doesn't need to go faster. They need brighter headlights. Emotion creates the fog. Reason is the light. So how do you avoid being controlled by emotions? I have a simple rule. I call it the 12-hour pause. When I want to make a decision out of emotion, I stop. I don't do anything. I sleep on it. If the next morning my reason still says it's right, I do it. If the next morning the emotion has cooled, I know I just avoided a bad decision. I want you to ask yourself, the last time you regretted a decision, did you make it with emotion or with reason? Emotion isn't bad. Emotion makes you human. But if you let emotion drive, your life will crash more often than it needs to. Let emotion be the passenger and let reason be the driver. When you learn to stand firm in front of your emotions, you'll be ready for the final principle, the one most people give up on before they ever see its true power. Principle 7, don't quit before compounding starts working. There is a truth I wish I had understood very early. Not everyone fails because they do things wrong. Most fail because they stop too soon. Not because they're not capable enough. Not because they're not lucky enough. Not because they chose the wrong path, but because they didn't stay long enough to see the path begin to bloom. I've seen this happen in many areas. Relationships, career, finances, personal growth, investing. Every journey is the same. The first years are always slow, boring, and unclear. I remember a young man once asked me, "Jim, why don't I see progress? I've tried for 3 years and nothing has changed." I asked him back, "Do you know how long it takes for bamboo to grow?" He shook his head. I said, "It takes 5 years just to grow roots. During those 5 years, there's nothing above ground. But when the roots are deep enough, it can grow several feet in just a few weeks." Success is like that too. It always comes later than you want, but faster than you expect. I once met a man who had invested regularly for 7 years. But when the market crashed in the 8th year, he sold everything, closed his account, and gave up completely. A year later, the market recovered strongly. He looked back and said something I'll never forget. "Jim, if I had just held on 1 more year, my life would have been different." I want you to engrave this. The real power of compounding only appears after you've patiently pushed through the years when nothing seems to move. The early years of any journey are like pushing a big rock. You try your best, but it only moves a little. You sweat, but nobody sees it. You pour your heart into it, but the results don't reflect your effort. You look around and see others going faster, and you start to lose hope. But what you don't see is that they also went through their early years. You just weren't there to witness it. There is a very dangerous illusion in this era. We see other people's success like a fast-forwarded video, but real life has no fast-forward button. Let me tell you about a friend of mine. He started investing when he was poor, patiently putting in a little every month. Year 1, nothing changed. Year 2, still the same. Year 5, still struggling, still nothing significant. But he kept going. Year 10, a few signs appeared. Year 20, he began to be free. Year 30, he became more successful than he had ever imagined. One day I asked him, "What made you successful?" He answered slowly, "Because I stayed longer than my own doubts." That sentence to me is the essence of Principle 7. You see, compounding is not just a financial formula, it's a life principle. You take care of your health every day, but don't see changes, that's compounding. You read one chapter a day, but don't feel smarter, that's compounding. You save a little each month, but don't feel richer, that's compounding too. All important things grow in silence. And when they grow in ways you can hardly keep up with. I want you to ask yourself a very honest question. How many things have you quit right before they were about to become the best thing that ever happened to you? A relationship that could improve with just a bit more patience. A skill that could break through with just a few more months of practice. A plan that could bear fruit with just a few more weeks of persistence. An investment that could grow powerfully with just one more cycle. But people, they quit when they're bored. They quit when they doubt. They quit when they compare. They quit because they forget that all great things come after a long silent phase. I want to leave you with one last image. Imagine you are mining for gold. You dig for 3 years, seeing only rocks, stones, and dust. You're tired, discouraged, and lose faith, and you decide to stop. You put down your pickaxe and walk away. But if you had dug just 1 more meter, you would have hit the thickest vein of gold. Most people quit in that last meter. Don't be one of them. Ask yourself, what in your life is being left unfinished just because you don't see immediate results? And what would happen if you kept going for just 1 more year? When I look back on my journey, what I'm most grateful for is not what I did right, but what I learned not to do wrong. The 7 principles we've gone through are not flashy, not get-rich-quick strategies, and not tips to help you win big overnight. They are shields keeping you from losing the most precious years of your life. I used to think success was a straight road where effort alone was enough, but then I realized life doesn't just measure the strength of your steps, it also measures the strength of what you know how to avoid. Avoid learning the wrong way. Avoid misunderstanding what you're holding in your hand. Avoid bursts of impatience that make you lose yourself. Avoid spreading your life across too many unimportant things. Avoid bleeding financially just because of a lack of clarity. Avoid letting emotions decide your life. And most importantly, avoid quitting before your journey has a chance to bloom. I hope you remember this. None of us lacks potential, but many of us lack perseverance. None of us lacks opportunity, but many of us lack focus. None of us lacks dreams, but many people quit before they ever get to live in those dreams. If anything touched you today, I hope it is this truth. You don't need to change your whole life immediately. Just preventing yourself from making one mistake that could take 10 years from you is enough to change your future. And if you are still walking, still trying, still putting in the effort, then I hope you keep going. It's okay to go slowly. It's okay to be tired. It's okay to doubt. Just don't stop when you're very close to what you've always wanted. If any part of this video helped you see more clearly or feel stronger, leave a "so I know you're still walking with me." And if you want to keep receiving deeper, slower, more life-rooted lessons, you know what to do. Before you leave, I want to leave you with a quote that has carried me through many years. Success is not something you pursue. It is something you attract by the person you become. See you in the next video where we continue the journey of growing up little by little.